Why is it that people who claim they want to buy a Mercedes oftentimes go and buy a Volkswagen instead? Well, this is consumer theory, and that's what we're going to be talking about today. Consumer theory is all about just understanding why it is that people buy the things that they do. And in order to get a little deeper understanding, all we do is we take preferences, what you like, what you want, and the budget that you have, how much money you have, and the prices of the things you want to buy. We put them all together, and then you make your optimal choice. That's it. Let's start off with the budget line. I'm going to do a really simple example just with apples and bananas. So you've got $15. You've got apples cost $1, bananas cost $2. You can see that there. And an easy way to think about drawing the graph is just say, well, imagine you were spending all your money on apples. You can see there that you would be on the y-axis at 15 and on the x-axis at 0. So we can shift these curves around, all right? So let's think about what happens if the price of apples changes. You can see that the graph is moving. It's pivoting. The slope of the line is pivoting. And what happens if we have a change in income? Well, our budget changes. We can buy more stuff. So the budget line shifts out, but the slope isn't changing because the slope really represents the prices. Next, we're going to look at preferences. Let's switch our example to t-shirts and pizzas. You can see that we graph it with the two goods, one on the y-axis, one on the x-axis. And what's on the inside is just what we would call our bundles or basket. And that just represents different amounts of pizzas and t-shirts. Now, the interesting question that we want to think about is, well, what do we like more, right? Which bundles do we like more? And one of the main assumptions in consumer theory is that more is better. So a bundle which is up and to the right is going to give us higher utility, higher happiness, so to speak, than one that's to the bottom and to the left. But what about one that's up to the left or down to the right? Because in that case, it's like we either have, let's say, more pizza and less t-shirts or vice versa. Well, what we can do is we can draw a line. We call it an indifference curve, a line where we're indifferent. And that's just a fancy way of saying where we have the same amount of happiness. And one thing that you might notice is that this curve takes a weird shape, but it has that shape for a reason. So it has this, let's say, what we would call a convex shape. And a good way of thinking about it is like this. So imagine you had no t-shirts and a whole lot of pizza. Well, you'd be full of pizza, right? Once you have 10, 20 pizzas, that extra pizza doesn't mean that much to you. But you have no t-shirts, you're cold, right? And if you went outside, people would laugh at you if you had no t-shirt. So one t-shirt's worth a lot. You'd be willing to trade a lot of pizzas for one t-shirt at that point, right? So we call that the marginal rate of substitution. And vice versa. Imagine you had a whole bunch of t-shirts, you had lots of clothes, but you had no pizza. In that case, you would not value t-shirts that much, and you'd be willing to trade a lot of them for one pizza. So the slope of that indifference curve we call the marginal rate of substitution, just to repeat myself. All right. And finally, what we do for consumer choice is we take our preferences, we take our utility curves, our indifference curves, and what we want to do is we want to find the highest level of utility that we can afford, which is within our budget. So if you look at the graph here, you can see what we're doing is we're pulling up our indifference curves, and each higher level of indifference curve is a higher level of utility. And you can see that when we get to the point where our indifference curve is just tangent, just touching the budget line, that's going to be the optimal consumption point, right? That's where we can be at the highest level of happiness and still afford it. And that is how we do consumer theory.